Hi guys, I am 3 days away from my due date and this is very random, but I suddenly got the urge to tell you Ezra's birth story. So after 2 years of telling you, maybe I'll tell it soon, here I am, like last chance before our second baby arrives. And I think earlier on I was just, every time I thought about telling it, it just didn't feel right. Like I felt, I don't know, it took me a long time before I could finally tell the story without crying and getting all choked up and emotional because it was really traumatic. It ended up being a wild ride. Okay, so I actually just listened to a recording that I had on my phone of James and I telling the birth story to some of our friends afterwards, and it was like an hour and a half. So many details, so many things I had forgotten, so I jotted a few notes down just to help me remember some of the details with more accuracy. I will definitely condense this version for you. It's not going to take an hour and a half to tell the story, but basically we were planning with Ezra to have his birth at a local birth center. James's aunt works there, she's a midwife, and she works with some really great people, other midwives. We did all our prenatal care there, love the place, love the people. But that would be completely a natural birth. They don't do Pitocin or anything there, and no epidurals or anything. So that was our first choice, our ideal for Ezra. Another thing that was super nice about the birth center, Ezra was born kind of during the pandemic, but the birth center was a lot more lenient on, like, I could have multiple people there. You can give birth like in whatever position you want, whatever's most comfortable. They have a tub in your room. You can bring in like lights and snacks and literally whatever you want to make it cozy for your delivery. So I was, I believe, like 3 days overdue, 3, 4. I think Ezra was born at like 5 days past my due date. And both James's aunt and the midwife we were working with could feel that Ezra had a huge head. And so they were like, well, you know, he's full term, like his head is just getting bigger by the day. We should probably get him out as soon as possible. So it's our first time. We really don't have a lot of strong opinions or ideas. We're just eager to meet him. So we're like, okay, yeah, let's go ahead. They were recommending a natural induction. And they were right about his head, by the way. It was huge. He had a 14.9 inch head, and our midwife said she has only ever once seen a 15 inch head. So that was part of the reason it was so hard to get him out. I took castor oil one night and then woke up in the morning and went in to the birth center, and they put in a Foley bulb, which is basically like a rubber balloon that they insert and then they fill it up with water. So it's like a heavy little hard balloon which mimics the baby's head, and it sits right on top of your cervix, like pressing down and kind of creating like a false, or kind of mimicking like what the baby's head would do on top of your cervix, just to get labor rolling. So she put the Foley bulb in. She had a super hard time getting the Foley bulb in because apparently my cervix was like at an angle. She had to go like around a corner or something. I don't know. She was like sweating and panting, and I was like holding on for dear life. It hurt so bad. But she got it in, finally. She had to stop and take some breaks. And got it in, filled it up with water, sent me home, and wow, my contractions, it really kicked off contractions. So I started having hard, painful contractions, but I knew it was my first. I was probably gonna labor for a long time at home. So James actually went to work. He's like, you stay home and work through these contractions. I'm gonna go to work. And I was like, yeah, that's great. They just slowly, steadily kept getting harder and getting closer together. I had planned during this time to like go out and do fun stuff, just like keep my mind off of it as long as possible. I was gonna go to thrift stores. I was gonna go like to a bookstore and like get a coffee, get my favorite coffee, look at like design magazines, just like go shopping. I don't know, whatever I could do to keep my mind off of it. But they were actually so bad, I had no desire to leave the house. Like I couldn't think. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to walk around a thrift store and act like a normal human. Like, it was getting pretty painful. So my mom and sister Christy came over, and Christy actually brought me the coffee drink I wanted. The Caramelicious Blender half syrup from Scooters. That's what I wanted. So Christy brought me that, and it really helped. Like, I didn't have like the mental capacity to like do something fun, but I kind of needed to keep moving, and it felt like if I could just do something monotonous just to keep moving and keep my mind somewhat engaged without needing to think too hard, that was perfect. So I started watering my plants. I just walked to the sink with a cup of water, back to my plant, back and forth, just watering my plants, and that was perfect. And then I'd stop when the contractions came, work through them. And then James came home from work around 2 in the afternoon, and we went back into the birth center. But the Foley bulb is supposed to just like fall out when it's done doing its work because you're dilated that far. We went in at 2 and it hadn't fallen out yet. So she actually just sent us back home to keep working through them and wait till I dilate a little further, and then the Foley bulb is supposed to come out really easily or fall out on its own. So went back home, kept working on things, and then went back at like 7 that evening. And by then I was 100% effaced, which means my cervix was all the way thin and soft and down. And I was at a 4.5. She pulled and the bulb came right out. And then she was basically like, okay, we have 2 options now. I could break your water, which means you will have the baby in 24 hours. So it'll be a long night. You would just stay here, break your water, get things going. Hopefully the baby will come before the morning, and we can just keep going with this. Or you can go home and get a good night of sleep, which would hopefully give you some more strength. Come back in the morning and I'll break your water, and then hopefully you'll have a little more energy for the birth. I was kind of eager to meet him. I was like, let's just do it, but I didn't have a strong feeling about it. James was like, we should go home and sleep and then try in the morning. So that's what we decided to do. Left the birth center that evening, and we're like, okay, let's just go do something really fun. This is our last night, you know, alone, and baby's coming tomorrow. So looking back, like 100% that was the right decision, to go home and get some rest, because I had been laboring all day. So I was working through contractions ever since the morning, and I was pretty tired. So left the birth center and we went to Dillon's, the grocery store, and just walked up and down the aisle buying whatever looked good to me. I was like, this is our night to party. The baby's coming tomorrow. I would stop and work through contractions as we were walking through the grocery store. But they did kind of start tapering off once the Foley bulb was out. We like bought a whole bunch of delicious snacks. We bought some special drinks. I bought like a $10 tiny little gluten-free cake that was so good. And we were just, yeah, waddling through the grocery store, like feeling all happy that our baby's coming, and buying cake and just passing time. So we went home, had like a cozy little evening with all our snacks, did fun stuff, and then went to bed, and I actually slept all night. I don't think I woke up once with like a contraction. And sadly in the morning then, it was like, oh man, my contractions have almost stopped. Like, they had really slowed down. But we went back into the birth center in the morning. So she's like, okay, I'm gonna break your water. But the thing with Ezra, I don't think he was ready to come, because he never really dropped. Well, it could be a couple things. So this baby already, I can feel he's like way lower than Ezra ever was. And I think through birth with Ezra, my pelvis opened up a little bit. Like, my hips are wider. They never went back, like, after Ezra was born. So I think like my pelvis is more open now. Also, Ezra had a huge head. So I think maybe with his huge head and maybe with my smaller pelvis, I don't know, he couldn't come down to where he was supposed to be on his own. Or maybe he just wasn't ready. Maybe I wasn't ready. I don't know. But she said she was gonna needle my sac instead of like puncture it to break it, so that the water comes slowly and the sac slowly lets Ezra's head down, because he was up so high still that if she would have ruptured it, it would come out in a gush. He'd drop really fast, and there's a chance he could have like pinched the cord in there on his way down. So she just needled my sac, and then she had me like walk and walk and walk around the birth center. It was just slowly, my water was coming out. I did this little like circuit around a room. Well, I'd go like out one door into the lobby, back in the other door, and James was sitting in a rocker there reading The Little Engine That Could. And then every time I'd come in, he'd give me a kiss, and then I'd keep going and then back around. That was my little reward, and I was like listening to the story, and my contractions were really picking up. Like I was just trying to stay distracted and keep walking and get things going again. So that was a fun time. The birth center was actually closed that day for like all prenatal appointments and stuff. So it was just us in there. Like literally the receptionist wasn't even there. But our midwife came in, broke my water, and then she was in and out. So after a while, she checked his heart rate. Ezra's heart rate was good. She's like, yeah, I think it's gonna be a bit yet, so why don't you just go home, keep working through contractions, and then give me a call if things pick up, or towards evening you can come back and settle in. So we went home, worked through contractions, came back that evening. So this is like my second full day of working through contractions. She's like, why don't you just come in? Nobody's here, like the birth center's closed. Settle in, we'll start doing things to try to amp up your contractions, whatever we can. But she's like, the baby's coming in 24 hours since we broke your water, so you might as well come in now. So we went in, and it was amazing. James made our room so cozy. Okay, the birth center is already like so beautiful and homey and stuff, but then James strung up Christmas lights. He turned on my diffuser with like my favorite oils, playing like a worship playlist that we had put together. I was eating like all my favorite snacks. James was rubbing my feet. It was honestly, I mean, you're in labor, like you're in pain. It's not my dream scenario, but all things considered, it was pretty magical. I started pumping a bunch, and that really amped up my contractions. She would come in and listen to Ezra's heartbeat while I was having a contraction, and she started to notice that his heart rate would drop a little bit during my contractions, so she really wanted to keep an eye on it. I wasn't dilating very well, even though I was having these good contractions, and so she's like, you know what, you're not like seeming to move past this, and his heart rate is dropping during contractions. So she's like, at 9 or 10 tonight, we really need to reevaluate. If you're like at an 8 or 9, you're making good progress, you're about ready to deliver. She's like, we can do it here, and I think he'll be all right with his heart. But if we come back at like 9 and you're still not opening up further, and he's still in distress, she's like, we're gonna have to transfer you so that we can keep better track of like his heart rate, and we're probably gonna have to get you on Pitocin so that you open up faster, because we're gonna need to get him out if he's in distress. So kept working through everything. My mom and dad came and brought me supper, like a delicious homemade supper. We ate, we chatted, she came in, checked me again, and I was still only at a 5.5. And his heart rate was really like dropping pretty low every time I had a contraction. And she's like, I'm sorry, you don't have a choice, like you have to transfer. So this was like 10 or 11 at night, and it's like a good hour's drive to the hospital. So we got there close to midnight. It was really hard making that drive in the middle of labor. We got to the hospital around midnight, and because it was midnight, we had to go in through the ER, and the ER was a zoo. It was in the middle of the pandemic. Everybody was in there sick. The place was packed. They were so, like, we tried to tell them like who we are and what we're doing, and they're like, okay, well, you have to fill out all this paperwork, and it took us forever to get through that ER, which was so annoying because I was like in so much pain working through these contractions. We were also really worried about Ezra's heart rate because we knew they were dropping every time and we had no way to monitor him. I was literally like in the middle of labor. There was like no place to sit. I was just walking around trying to stay away from people, trying not to touch anything. Finally, they called up and then they were like, oh my goodness, okay, they're expecting you. They have a room waiting for you. Like, go up right away. Like, get a wheelchair. Let's take this lady up. And we were like, ugh, why couldn't we have done that from the beginning? But then they had to like spray down a wheelchair because of COVID protocol. Spray down the chair, let it dry for 5 minutes, and then get a person to push me, and whatever. Once we got through the ER entrance, then everything was so much better. So peaceful up there. The nurses were so nice. They met us at the doors. They wheeled me back, did a quick sono, took me to our room, and then got me hooked up to where they could monitor the baby, put me on IVs, all of that stuff. So the doctor that was going to deliver for us came in, introduced himself. He was so nice. He said, yeah, this is getting pretty urgent. Like, Ezra's not doing well. We probably have to get him out pretty fast. But we're going to put you on some Pitocin and see if we can get you to just speed up a little bit. He said, I'm actually going home, but I'm going to monitor you from home. I just live a few minutes from here, and I will be back as soon as they call me or things I see that they're starting to pick up. So he left. They put me on Pitocin. I started working through contractions. My contractions really amped up with the Pitocin. One thing I did not realize, I guess because it's my first time, I was a little naive. I had no clue that Pitocin contractions are so much harder than natural contractions. So like, if you're on Pitocin, they create contractions that just like slam into you. Like, they ramrod through you with no warning. And natural contractions have like this gradual buildup. You reach the top and then they like taper off. And it's a lot more like manageable. But these Pitocin contractions were crazy, and I was just like, oh, like, I don't know. I was still hoping that I could do this without an epidural, but it just got more and more intense. Every time I would have a contraction, Ezra's heart rate, he would just like freak out. His heart rate would drop. The alarms would go off, and then they quickly like try to get me in a different position or try to like tone down the Pitocin. I was working through these contractions for a long time. I was still like, no, I don't want an epidural. I think I'm okay. Christy and James were both there, and they were such good support. I was breathing in like these two oils, neroli and geranium, and I literally could feel a difference through my contractions with those oils, like in the pain. I was like, I think I can do this, but they were just getting harder and harder because they kept cranking up the Pitocin. He did start coming down, but I was only dilated to a 6, I think, at this point. So we're like, he's coming. I think the Pitocin was like pushing him out, but I was not dilating at all. So I was still at a 6. And then there were a couple residents that were working on the birth with our doctor, and one of them came and asked if she could check me. I said, sure. And then she said, oh, there's like a 4 bag. So basically, even though they broke my water, and that came out, somehow part of the lining got like pinched and started filling up again. So there was like a little balloon. It had almost like resealed or made another little like sack of water. And she's like, do you care if I pop that? I was like, sure, because I think that was holding us back a little bit. So she popped that, broke the water again. And then they were like, I really think you have to get an epidural. They were like, there's a really good chance you're gonna have to go to C-section because you're just not opening up and he's in distress. We have to get him out quickly. So they said, if you have an epidural, when we go into C-section, you can be awake for the C-section, you can see his birth. If you haven't had an epidural by the time we go to C-section, we won't have time to do that. We'll just have to knock you out. So I was getting up to get my epidural, and all of a sudden, everything went crazy. My nurse looked at the monitor, and her face just like went white. She like threw me back down on the bed. She was like, we are not getting up. We're not doing the epidural right now. All the alarms started going off. Like, Ezra's heart rate had plummeted, and it was like super dangerous. She put oxygen on me right away. She started flipping me back and forth, trying to find a position that would maybe put less pressure on Ezra, I guess. She was like calling for help. People just started rushing into the room. They were trying all these different things. The alarms were just going off. It's so loud in there, and everybody was just like frantically moving me around, trying to do things. They wanted to turn off the Pitocin because the Pitocin was just up really high, making things go crazy, and I think they have to have doctor's permission to do that, so they're trying to get permission to turn off the Pitocin. And it was so scary. Like, I was looking over at James and Christy, and they were like trying to talk to me, but I couldn't hear anything. It was so loud with the oxygen pumping right here, and they were wearing masks because of COVID, so I couldn't read their lips, and I was just like so scared. It was in that moment that I really thought we were losing him. Man, this is crazy. I guess I still can hardly tell the story without getting choked up. But yeah, it got really intense and really scary for a while. I wanted to ask them, like, nobody was explaining anything to me because they were all so focused on what they were doing, wanted to know, but I also was just like, if I ask them, I'm just going to distract them. Obviously, they know what they're doing, and they're doing everything that they can to save him and to help me. I didn't want to distract them. I just wanted to. I was just like praying as hard as I could that Ezra would be okay. And eventually they got permission to turn off the Pitocin. When they turned off the Pitocin and found a better position for me, I guess, things calmed down a little bit and his heart rate came back up. And then our doctor came flying into the room, like, right as things were kind of calming down. He came as soon as he could, but he lived like 15 minutes away. So they got his heart rate back up, and they were just like, okay, we really, really need to get him out of here. I was at an 8. Yeah, like in those 5 minutes, I went from a 6 to an 8. So he was like going over our options. He said, I still hadn't had my epidural at this point. We have a couple options. You can go ahead and get your epidural like you were planning to, and then if we go to C-section, you can be awake for it, or we can also just see if the epidural will help you relax to where you can open up. Like I said, I was at an 8. I went from a 6 to 8. No, I went from like a 5 to an 8. What was it? 6 to an 8 in 5 minutes. And so he's like, if you keep opening up, we can try for a vaginal delivery. Also, if he's still not coming, we have a couple options. We could use a vacuum. He was just telling us all our options. So I was like, let's go ahead and get the epidural. But I was at an 8. I was cranked up on Pitocin. My contractions were horrible. I was like a little unsure if I could actually hold still for the epidural. But I knew it was my last chance. If I wanted to be awake during this delivery, this was my last chance to get an epidural. And I was in so much pain, I was like, I just need something to put my feet on so that I can brace myself, so like no matter how bad this pain is, I'll hold still through the epidural, because I didn't want to get paralyzed. So they brought like a bar stool over, put my feet on there. The nurse like leaned over the back of the bar stool. She put her hands on both my shoulders, and she's like, okay, you are going to do this. Just look me straight in the eyes. No matter what you're feeling, you hold still. Like, you cannot move or it could paralyze you. So I was like just praying that I could hold still through, because these contractions were so bad. I just did not know if I could hold still through a contraction, but I was like, I have to. I'm going to. Like, she just like held me tight. I pressed on that stool. I stared her in the eyes. I was just like never so determined in my life. He put the needle in, and all of a sudden it felt like a lightning bolt went through my leg. My leg shot straight up in the air, and I was horrified. It was like a horrible pain through my leg. I was horrified that I had moved, but it was completely involuntary. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Did I mess something up? Whatever. And they were all kind of sheepish. And it was the anesthesiologist's fault. He brushed a nerve when he went in, and that nerve shot through my leg. But it was already in, so it didn't do any damage. So they got the epidural in. I laid back down, and sadly, it took a long time for the epidural to kick in. They were all assuming that I was pain-free now. but I was still really fighting through these contractions. And finally they realized that the epidural wasn't kicking in, I guess, so they gave me more. Eventually, like, it did numb stuff out, but then even through like delivery, I could feel everything. Like, they would say, okay, we're gonna flip you over now, and I would just turn over on my own, and they were like, wait, how can you do that? Like, I could still feel everything in my legs. When they were telling me like where to push, I was like, should I just push where I feel your hands or whatever? And they're like, you can feel that? And I like got a cramp in my leg. I could feel that. I just don't think I was supposed to be feeling that much. It still helped like crazy. Like, it cut the pain way down. But I don't think I was as numb as I was supposed to be, or maybe the epidural just didn't really work on me like it's supposed to. But anyway, the epidural brought me so much relief, and I could rest for a little bit. And then doctor came back in. Ezra's heart rate had dropped again, and he's like, hey, we have to get him out. So I wasn't even fully dilated at this point. I never reached a 10, but they're like, he has to come out now. So we decided to try vaginally, and I would push as hard as I could. They got the vacuum out, put that on his head, and started pulling. There were 11 people in the room besides James and Christy and I. So there was like a neonatal doctor, there was a unit from the NICU, all like ready. They had brought in like a unit to work on him as soon as he was out. There were the residents, the doctor, the nurses, the anesthesiologist, and they were all like gathered around my bedside. And it was so intense. Yeah?
We go to doctors, have a baby in our tummy.
Yeah, we all go to the doctor because we have a baby in our tummy.
Yeah.
We're gonna go get this baby out soon.
And a tummy.
Put it in Ezra's tummy?
Yeah.
No, he's just gonna come out of Mommy's tummy and then you can hold him. Anyway, so yeah, there was like a dozen people around my bed. And they were all pulling as hard as they could while I was pushing as hard as I could. It was actually so helpful. They would, every time a contraction would come, everybody would just like hype me up and like yell, like go, like push harder. I would hold my breath. When a contraction would come, they'd say, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. I'd hold my breath and push as hard as I could for 8 seconds. After 8 seconds, I'd grab another breath and push as hard as I could, and then another breath after 8 and push again. So I'd have like 3 chunks of 8 seconds where I would just be holding it and pushing as hard as I could, and everyone was yelling. It was really intense and really scary, and they were pulling as hard as I could with the vacuum. My doctor was literally just like not ripping me apart. He was a great doctor, but like he was pulling with both hands, like trying to open me up. And they were pulling with the vacuum, and like it was completely full of people around my bedside. The alarms were going off every time his heart rate would drop. They were cranking the Pitocin. I was on oxygen. I was pushing as hard as I could. Everybody was yelling. And then the vacuum popped off, which is like a safety thing because you would literally pull the baby apart if it was too hard or too long. So the vacuum popped off, which was a really bad sign. When the vacuum popped off, blood just splattered everywhere. Like I was laying there looking at everybody, and everybody's face got like splattered in blood. There was blood all over their glasses. There was blood on the ceiling. It was just really intense. They put the vacuum back on, but Scarper said if it pops off again, we have to go straight to C-section. Like there's no option. It's not safe to try again. He's just stuck. I was pushing with every ounce of strength I had left, and they kept yelling at me, breathe for the baby, breathe for the baby. I was like breathing, his heart rate was dropping, blood was flying everywhere. It was so intense. Like the people from the NICU were there ready to like whisk him away as soon as he came out. But the vacuum popped off a second time. Our doctor was like, okay, like they had the operating room ready. He called over, he said, we're coming for a C-section, like we have to get this baby out.
Yeah.
They were getting me up to take me over to C-section, and then it was like a little miracle, I guess, because Ezra's heart rate came back up for a second. And my doctor was like, okay, well, hang on, we might have a little bit more time. We can try one more time. So I laid back down, and we tried without the vacuum for a few times, and he was coming like a little bit. They were just pulling me open. I was pushing as hard as I could. They cranked the Pitocin up, and he did start coming. And then they put the vacuum back on him for one last shot and pulled, and he came out. And oh, it was such huge relief that he was out. But when he came out, he wasn't crying, he wasn't breathing right. He squeaked a little bit. They put him up on my chest right away, and I got to hold him for just a few seconds. But then they had to take him, clamp the cord, cut it, and whisk him off to work on him to make sure he was okay, to get him breathing and stuff. So he was right there in the room with us, just at the other end of the room with the neonatal doctor, and they put CPAP machine on him, and we're just like working on him to try to get him to breathe. And we were just like holding our breath, like praying that there was no brain damage, that he would start breathing, that he was gonna be okay. But just huge relief that he was out and that they were taking care of him. And I don't know how long they had to work on him before they were able to bring him back to me, but I got to hold him a little bit more. And then sadly, I think just from how much blood I lost, I hemorrhaged, and they were down there just like sewing me up. Like while they were working on Ezra, the doctor and a couple others were down there just like stitching and stitching and stitching and stitching, because I tore so bad because they just had to blast him out. So they were getting me sewn up. They brought Ezra back. I got to hold him a little bit, but then because I had hemorrhaged and lost so much blood, I was just like shaking like crazy. I was I couldn't stop shaking. I think I shook for like an hour. But then they started sitting me up, and I passed out, and they had to take Ezra. James held Ezra, but they were trying. I came back too. Passed out. Willis. Hey baby, we gotta keep it right here, okay? Okay, sorry. I was passing out and vomiting and shaking, and it was so frustrating because all I wanted to do was hold my baby, but I felt like I couldn't even control myself. I couldn't hold him or I'd drop him. So I was really sad I couldn't hold him right away, but James was holding him, and they were taking really good care of me. And once I kind of stabilized a little bit, they gave Ezra back to me. And then honestly, from there on out, it was like bliss, because he was safe, he was breathing, there was no brain damage that they could see. I got all cleaned up, all stitched up, and eventually got to move to our room where we would be spending the night. And then I just got to hold him, snuggle him. He latched right away. We started working on nursing. And then I think we were in the hospital like for 3 or 4 days. Because birth was traumatic for him and I, we had to stay for quite a while. He had so much swelling in his body from the vacuum and the pressure and everything, that he had a lot stacked against him. He lost so much weight then because of the stress. He had super hard time eating. We had so much that went into getting him fed. So many tests they had to run on him. His bilirubin levels were super high, so he had to be in this little like incubator thing. There were some really hard parts about recovery at the hospital, but also it just felt so good to be there and be so taken care of, just to be able to finally hold my baby and to know that he was safe and healthy. One thing I will say, for anyone else that has gone through like a traumatic birth or anything that's been really hard and painful, our doctor was incredible. with helping us process. He came into our room several days later and was like, that was not a normal birth. Like, that was traumatic. Most people after experiencing something like that will have some pretty bad PTSD and anxiety. But we have found that the best thing to help combat that is just to process as much as you can. Like, talk about it as much as you can. Tell the story. Talk to people you love and trust about it. But just the more you can process, the better it will help to fight PTSD. And he said often when you're in a situation like that, that's traumatic, intense, you're in pain, and things are happening to you and you don't understand why people are doing what they're doing. He said our bodies often remember that as abuse, and so they store that as abuse and you have to deal with it later. So he said, I want you to ask me any questions, like anything.
Tractor.
Oh yeah, can you draw a tractor? See if you can draw a tractor. He said if there was anything through the birth that you didn't know why we were doing what we were doing, he's like, please just ask me any questions you have, because if I can answer those questions, it will help your body kind of like put those things to rest. And so he sat there for like an hour just answering questions, talking through the birth with us. Like, he was incredible. And I know other people that have gone through traumatic births and literally, you know, 4 or 5 years later, they're shaking while they talk about it. They have so much PTSD, like can't sleep at night, horrible anxiety. And I feel so, so, so grateful and blessed that I don't have more of that. I had a little bit of that postpartum, just a few times, like while I was still at the hospital. One time I was in the restroom just like looking in the mirror, my mind kind of wandered a little bit, and then I had a contraction like after the labor, and my mind wasn't really engaged, and when I felt that feeling, my body just freaked out. Like, I think I thought I was going back into labor, like, oh no, it's starting all over again. But then as soon as like I engaged my mind and like was like mindful about it and thought through things and was speaking truth and like realizing that I'm safe, it's over, then my body could calm down. And then like another time when we were coming back to the hospital for like a checkup, again I was kind of spacing out the car window, and then I looked over and caught a glimpse of the hospital.
Red fish.
Oh, good idea. Can you draw red fish? Caught a glimpse of the hospital, and again my body just went into panic mode because I think I thought I was going back into it again. So little moments of PTSD like that, but every time I would like engage and work through it, like I was fine again. So I'm just so grateful that I don't have more from it. I'm so grateful that I can go into this birth feeling confident and peaceful. A huge part of what's giving me peace is we are just going to the same hospital with the same doctor from the beginning this time. So I know that the NICU's right there. We'll have, even if like things go badly again, which we're praying for a much better birth, I feel so confident it's going to be so much better this time. But even if, like, no matter what happens, we're going to have everything we need right there. I'm just going in with, like, my goals are just to have it as pain-free and calm and peaceful and comfortable as possible. So I'm just going to let myself get an epidural as soon as I want one. For sure, if I go on Pitocin, I'm getting an epidural right away. We're not going to induce this time, I don't think, unless he goes like way overdue. We'll just give him all the time he wants. And yeah, I just think it's going to be so much better this time. So I'm so grateful I don't have like the fear and anxiety going into this labor. I think it's going to be really good, and I'm praying that it will be actually a healing experience after what we went through with Ezra. But end of the story, like, we're just so grateful that Ezzy is here with us and that he's safe. and he's so smart and so sweet, and we don't see like a lot of after effects or trauma in his life from the birth. Another thing they told us is just the trauma for him is best combated with lots of skin to skin, lots of connection, lots of security and safety, and like anything you can do, co-sleeping or like contact napping and skin to skin, and just all of that will really help him and his little body as it releases the trauma from birth. So also feel really grateful that we've been able to do that for him since he was our first. I had all the time in the world to do that with him, and I feel so grateful for that and never want to take those moments for granted. I know things will be really different with this baby now that it's our second, but I'm excited for what's ahead and so grateful that things turned out the way they did with Ezra. We had such great people around us. Anyway, that's the story. 2 years late, but better now than never, I guess. Thank you for listening. Sorry, I feel like this was actually pretty long, but it's kind of nice to have it recorded somewhere so we can look back just on the faithfulness of God, how present he was even in the like really hard points in labor. I'm so grateful for a God who cares and a God who's present no matter what we're going through. Anyway, we will see you next Friday at 5, maybe. Hopefully next Friday at 5 I will be snuggling a newborn baby, but we're not going to rush him this time, so he'll come when he's ready, I guess. But thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.